I was driving back from a client site south of Dallas when I took the familiar detour past my parents' house on Timberleaf Drive. The evening sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, illuminating something unexpected: balloons fluttering in the breeze, cars lining both sides of the street, and a professionally printed banner that made my stomach drop celebrating our pillar Callista's 10 years leading Bundy freight. Callista's name alone, not our parents. Not the family business we had both helped build. Just her. I parked two houses down, engine still running, and tried to process what I was seeing. The sting of exclusion wasn't new, but the deliberate celebration of my erasure felt different. Growing up as the younger Bundy daughter, I'd always believed that hard work would eventually be noticed, that showing up and making the right choices would make me matter in my family's eyes. But lately, being invisible seemed less like an oversight and more like a strategy. Before someone could spot me sitting there like a trespasser outside my childhood home, I drove away. The image of that banner burned into my mind. Back at my apartment, I pulled out a plastic bin of keepsakes I'd been meaning to organize. Beneath layers of old report cards and faded photographs, I found the silver hairpin engraved with the letter E. My mother had given it to me on my 16th birthday, clasping my hands in hers as she said, "As long as you wear it, Evie, I'll always see you as strong." I held it under the lamp, the silver catching the light. Once, this small token had made me feel seen. Now it felt like evidence of something lost. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to discard it. This complicated talisman from a mother who once saw me clearly, before other loyalties clouded her vision. That night, while reheating leftover pasta, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Ivana Stroud," a male voice asked when I answered. "This is Gerald Hellbrook, your parents' estate attorney. I apologize for calling out of the blue, but I've been following up on the trust transition paperwork. You never returned your signed copy." My fork froze midway to my mouth. What paperwork? The pause on the other end stretched uncomfortably long. "It was sent 3 months ago. Certified mail to your apartment in Garland." "I never received anything like that," I said, a cold certainty settling in my chest. Another pause. "Would you have a moment to meet in person? I think we need to review a few things together." The next morning, I visited the post office, where a clerk with sympathetic eyes checked the forwarding history on my mailbox. "According to our records, your name was temporarily removed due to a change of service form," she explained, turning her monitor slightly so I could see. "It was signed digitally by Callista Bundy. I'm sorry, but it says the address was updated to her name only." I nodded numbly, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't accidental. It was methodical. Mr. Hellbrook's office smelled of leather and old books. He greeted me with a wary look that suggested he was caught in something he hadn't anticipated, leading me to a quiet conference room with half-drawn blinds. He placed a folder on the table between us. "I want to be clear," he began, clasping his hands together. "What I'm showing you today is based on your parents' most recent instructions, but given the circumstances, I have concerns." He slid over the current trust documents. The signatures were real, the notary seal official. My parents had legally signed over every piece of family property, land, and company share to Callista. My name appeared nowhere. "All of it," I whispered, fingertips brushing against the heavy paper. Mr. Hellbrook cleared his throat. "In the older version, you were listed as co-beneficiary. That version is still in our records." He hesitated, conflict evident in his expression. "I have professional obligations to follow my client's instructions, but also ethical obligations to ensure all parties are properly informed." He stood and walked to his safe, removing a cream envelope sealed with a gold sticker. "This was meant for you. It's dated 6 months before the new documents." Your parents dropped it off themselves. Why didn't I ever get this? I asked, though I already knew. Your sister picked it up the day you were supposed to. Said she'd deliver it to you. His tone suggested he now regretted that decision. Breaking the seal, I unfolded the letter, and my heart plummeted. It wasn't just sentimental, it was legal. A notarized copy of the original trust document, clearly naming me as 50% co-owner of our parents' real estate and retirement fund, dated 14 months ago. I'll give you time with this, Mr. Hellbrook said gently, placing a glass of water beside me. Take it home, and Ivana, don't rush to respond, process first. At home that evening, I sat at my kitchen table, writing down numbers by lamplight. I'd been the one helping my parents pay off the second mortgage after the market crash. 78,300 over 6 years. That included the emergency plumbing, the new roof, and the surprise property tax bill in 2020. Every time I'd helped, my mother had called it a family favor. Apparently, those favors didn't come with a seat at the table. Yet, even as anger burned through me, a quieter voice questioned whether I'd been helping for recognition or out of genuine love. Both answers felt uncomfortable. The next afternoon, I drove to my father's mechanic shop. The corrugated siding and squeaky doorbell remained unchanged after 20 years. Dad sat behind the counter, flipping through invoices. When he looked up, his smile was polite but distant. "Didn't expect you today," he said, returning to his papers. "Thought I'd say hi," I replied, wandering toward the back wall where the founder's plaque hung, the one I designed myself 10 years ago. It had once listed my name beside Callista's under our parents. Now, my name was gone, the plaque professionally updated to erase my contribution. Was the plaque updated? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Dad didn't look up. Callista's been helping more lately. She's earned it. So erasing someone's name now counts as a promotion. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. He sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. You moved out. You're doing your own thing. But beneath his dismissive words, I caught a flash of something like guilt in his eyes. Not enough to make him stand up to whatever was happening, but enough to suggest he wasn't entirely comfortable with it. That evening, I accessed the Dallas County Clerk's online portal and typed in my parents' address. 3 months ago, the house had been legally transferred to Callista Bundy. No mention of joint ownership, no trust conditions, just a clean, quiet change. The same was true for our father's share in the family warehouse lot. As I stared at these digital confirmations of my removal, my phone buzzed with a message from Callista. Don't make this messy. You were never meant to have it anyway. I stared at those words until the screen dimmed. Not from shock, but from a cold, heavy certainty that something had been building long before I noticed the first signs. Sunday morning arrived bright and clear. I didn't bother with the deviled eggs my mother always expected me to bring to family gatherings. Instead, I picked up a store-bought pie and a bottle of wine, just enough to fulfill the unspoken requirement of bring something. The driveway was already packed when I arrived. Church friends in pastel cardigans milled about near the entrance, where Callista held court in a fitted dress, her laughter commanding attention. I waited for a lull before approaching. "Oh, you made it," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. I handed her the pie. "Store was out of your favorite, so I improvised." Inside, my mother directed a teenager I didn't recognize around the serving trays. She clasped her hands when she saw me. "It's so nice to have both my girls here," she cooed, eyes lingering on Callista, "especially the one who's been through thick and thin with us." I swallowed the comment, filing it away with the growing evidence of my deliberate exclusion. During lunch, I noticed my elderly Aunt Margaret watching me with a furrowed brow. When Callista excused herself to refill drinks, Aunt Margaret leaned over. "Haven't seen you at these gatherings lately. Evie." Thought you might have moved away like they said. Like who said? I asked quietly. Her weathered face registered surprise. Your folks said you'd moved on to bigger things? She patted my hand. Never sat right with me. You were always the one checking in on everyone. Before I could respond, Callista clinked her glass for attention. I just wanted to thank everyone for supporting my new initiative, she announced, beaming. The Callista Grace Foundation for Women in Recovery. And applause erupted. Camera flashes popped. The startup funds came from the estate, she added casually. My parents believe in what I'm doing, and I'm honored to carry the family legacy forward. I stared at my wine glass, counting breaths to stay calm. That money, part of it should have been mine. After lunch, I began gathering dishes as I always had, but as I reached for the last glass, my father appeared beside me. Don't worry about it. Callista's got it now. The dismissal stung like a slap. As I turned away, Callista leaned close, her breath warm against my ear. You're lucky I let you come today. I needed air. I excused myself and headed to the guest bathroom, the one I'd painted 6 years ago during Mom's recovery. Locked inside, I stared at my reflection, a woman tired not from age, but from effort unnoticed. Opening the cabinet for a tissue, I found a thick envelope tucked between expired medications. My stomach clenched as I pulled it out, a cream cardstock invitation with gold edges. Founders Dinner honoring Callista Grace Bundy as sole legacy bearer of the Bundy family vision. The date was for next month. They were using family funds to celebrate rewriting history, to toast her for claiming what we had built together. I flushed the toilet without using it, washed my hands slowly, and opened the door. Callista stood in the hall discussing guest lists with someone. I walked past her with just a whisper. I hope you enjoy the last meal where no one questions your lies. I didn't wait for her reaction. I wasn't going to scream or cry, but I was going to change everything, one document at a time. The following morning, I called in a personal day from work and drove downtown to the county courthouse. The records office was quiet, just a few clerks and researchers bent over documents at their stations. After filling out a request form for public property records, I sat down to wait, feeling sweat bead under my blouse. 10 minutes later, a clerk called me up and slid a folder across the counter. Inside were the recent deeds and legal filings tied to our family properties, including the lake house in Cedar Ridge. That house had always been sacred, built by my grandfather's hands, the site of every childhood summer. I'd believed if our family would ever heal, it would happen by that lake. But the paper in my hand told a different story. A quit-claim deed dated just 3 months back transferred the title solely to Callista. At first glance, it seemed legitimate, until I examined the signature. Ronald C. Bundy was written in a familiar hand, but the loops were wrong, the slant off. I'd seen this attempt at my father's signature before, years ago on a permission slip when Dad had been away. Mom had signed it, muttering, he'd say yes anyway. Back then, it seemed harmless. Now it felt criminal. As I stared at the forged signature, a wave of doubt crashed over me. Was I overreacting? Was this worth tearing apart what remained of our family? But as quickly as the doubt came, I remembered Callista's whispered threat and steeled myself. I printed 2 copies, placed them carefully in my folder, and left the building with measured steps. That afternoon, I visited Mr. Leadbetter, our family's former estate attorney who'd retired 2 years earlier, but still kept a home office. When I showed him what I'd found, he adjusted his glasses and frowned. This signature, it's clearly off, he muttered. I've seen this happen before, but what makes your situation interesting is that your father created a contingency trust in your name 10 years ago. A what? A trust that activates if he's declared incapacitated or if there's credible evidence of financial manipulation, he explained, his eyes meeting mine with genuine concern. This document, if proven false, could trigger it. Would that override the current will if the trust is valid and the trigger conditions are met? Yes, you could effectively reclaim legal control of a large portion of the estate. He leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. Your father once told me he worried about family pressure on you, that despite your generosity, you might be taken advantage of. He wasn't just being paranoid, it seems. I left his house with shaky hands, unsure whether to feel vindicated or heartbroken that my father had once cared enough to protect me, yet ultimately failed to do so. That evening, as I scanned documents into a secured cloud folder labeled Bundy Archive, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. The voicemail transcript appeared seconds later. Whatever you're digging into, stop. You're not thinking clearly. You don't want to destroy this family. My mother's voice, soft, measured, soothing, like a lullaby laced with poison. She was right about one thing: I didn't want to destroy the family, but I refused to let them destroy me. Agreed. By Friday afternoon, I had received the handwriting analyst's report confirming what I already knew: the signature on the quitclaim deed was highly unlikely to have been written by my father. It was everything I feared and everything I needed. That night, I couldn't eat or sleep. The restlessness in my body felt like preparation for something inevitable. The next morning, a text arrived from Callista. Mom wants brunch at Stone Cafe, neutral ground. We should all just talk. Don't wear drama. I replied simply, I'll be there. I wasn't going to make peace. I was going to measure the distance between who they thought I was and who I had become. Stone Cafe in Plano had glass walls and industrial lighting, the perfect setting for people who like to be seen. My mother and Callista were already seated when I arrived. Mom in one of her coral blazers, Callista standing to air kiss my cheek as if we were long-lost friends. Evie, she said with false warmth, glad you came? Conversation started with light chatter, weather, church announcements, a neighbor's new fence, but beneath the pleasantries, I felt their tension. They were waiting for me to break, to make a scene they could dismiss as typical emotional Evie. Finally, Mom leaned forward, touching my wrist lightly. You'll understand someday, Evie. We didn't want you burdened with property stuff. You've always been more sensitive. That word again, sensitive. Not just a description, but a dismissal, a way to sideline me while sounding maternal. I felt heat rising behind my ears, but kept my voice steady. I may be sensitive, I said softly, dabbing my lips with a napkin, but I'm not blind and I'm not small. Not anymore. Their expressions froze mid-smile. I stood, placed a 20 on the table for my untouched omelet, and turned to leave. Evie, come on, don't be dramatic, Callista called after me. I paused at the hostess stand, glancing back. Drama requires performance. I'm just done pretending this isn't real. Outside, I caught a glimpse of my mother's face through the glass, not angry, but stricken, as though seeing me clearly for the first time in years. For a moment, my resolve wavered. Then I remembered the forged signatures, the erased plaque, the stolen legacy, and walked to my car with steady steps. The following morning, I returned to the county clerk's office, this time with purpose. I requested documents related to all property transfers filed under my family's names in the past 5 years. A methodical investigation revealed that the lakeside property had been transferred the same weekend my father was hospitalized for a mild stroke, a weekend I'd spent in the waiting room while Callista was supposedly handling paperwork for the family. More disturbing was the notary service Texas sign notary, remote division. The registry number led to a woman named Monica Verrill, Callista's college roommate. At the records desk, a clerk with graying hair looked up from her computer. "Everything all right, honey? You've been staring at that paper like it might bite." "The notary on this document," I said quietly. "Do you know if there's a way to verify when and how it was executed?" She glanced over her glasses at the paper. "Remote notarization has records, legally required to keep video of the signing." She lowered her voice. "Between us, I've seen some questionable ones come through. People signing for others who are just in the other room. Not saying that's what happened here, but..." She didn't need to finish. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was fraud. That evening, I unlocked the fireproof box under my bed and pulled out the old living trust document Dad had asked me to store years ago. The language was clear. In the event of parental retirement or death, all properties and assets are to pass to Ivana K. Stroud, sole daughter and legal heir. Below was his signature, the real one, with the wide swooping R, the deliberate C, the funny loop in the B of Bundy that he always joked looked like a 6. I stared at it, grief washing over me. It brought back a memory sitting on the back porch at 16, sobbing over a rejected college application. Dad had squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "One day everything will be yours, not because you asked for it, but because you've earned it." I'd forgotten how solid that promise once felt until now. With renewed determination, I organized every piece of evidence: the original trust, the forged quit-claim deed, Monica Verrill's registry record, text messages from Callista, bank transactions for mortgage payments I'd covered, and voice recordings of my mother discussing Callista's sacrifice. Bolsaswol. Then I added one final document, a draft letter addressed to my family's estate attorney, detailing the evidence of fraud and my intention to contest all recent property transfers. That night, I sat at my window watching the streetlights flicker on, questioning whether what I was about to do was justice or revenge. Would exposing their deception mend anything, or would it only confirm that the family I thought I had never truly existed? As if hearing my thoughts. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from Mom. "Evie, please don't make a big deal out of this. We've all moved on. Just be grateful Callista's willing to manage things." The syrupy tone she used when trying to guilt me into submission only strengthened my resolve. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "Not this time." I drafted an email to Norel Nix, an attorney I'd worked with on a veterans housing initiative years earlier. Her reputation for unwavering integrity and precise legal strategy was exactly what I needed. In the subject line, I typed, "Client Ivana Stroud, breach of trust and property fraud inquiry." Then I hit send. The morning of the confrontation, I dressed in a crisp blue blouse and charcoal slacks. Professional, understated, armor-like. My black folder lay on the passenger seat, every page in order like ammunition for a silent war. Pulling into my parents' driveway, I noticed the magnolia tree still leaned slightly left, as if bowing toward the sidewalk. The wind chime my mother had loved for decades had been replaced with a sleeker glass version. Another small erasure of history. I rang the doorbell, and Callista answered, already smiling as if she'd won whatever battle was about to ensue, and she wore white, not cream, not beige, white, like this was some kind of coronation. "Glad you could make it," she said sweetly, stepping aside. "We're all waiting in the living room." Inside, the scene was staged like a tribunal. Dad sat in his recliner, arms crossed as if this were a minor dispute he'd reluctantly referee. Mom perched on the edge of the sofa, hands neatly folded in her lap, and there on the coffee table lay a folder. Not mine. Callista reached for it the moment I sat down. "This is just a formality." she began, her voice professional and controlled. A final draft of the division agreement. It's been reviewed by a third-party mediator. I held up my hand. Before you go further, I said, unzipping my case and laying out my documents on the glass table. 1, 2, 3, quietly, deliberately. Callista's mouth twitched. This is the original living trust, I explained. Dated 5 years ago with both parents' signatures. I placed the next document beside it. And this is a notarized copy of the property deed transfer filed last month. I slid over a highlighted printout. The notary registered to Monica Verrill. I believe you remember her. Callista? No one spoke. In the silence, I could hear the refrigerator humming from the kitchen. And this letter, I continued, placing the final sheet flat on the table, is from my attorney, confirming that these transactions can be contested and that fraud, especially involving forged signatures, is grounds for civil and criminal action. Callista's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Then take me to court, I replied, my voice steady. You're vindictive, Evie. You always have been, she snapped, her composure cracking. You ran off to college and came back thinking you were better than us. I tilted my head slightly. I came back because no one else was willing to remind you that I didn't need your permission to exist. Mom gasped, not in shock, but in fear. She clutched Dad's hand, but he didn't squeeze back. The look he gave her suggested silent communication, perhaps blame. You never said you didn't want the estate, she said softly. You were always so sensitive. We thought Callista could handle things more. She trailed off. More compliantly, I finished. The room stilled. Just then, my phone buzzed. I clicked on speaker. This is Attorney Norrell Nix, came a calm, authoritative voice. If we don't have confirmation of mutual resolution by Monday 9:00 a.m., we will proceed with a formal petition for injunction and review of all assets in question. I trust that's clear. No one responded. I stood, gathering my documents with steady hands. I had rehearsed every step of this moment, but found I didn't need to fake composure anymore. It came naturally, born from months of silent preparation. As I turned to leave, my eyes caught a photo frame on the shelf behind me. That old family trip to San Antonio. The photo showed only 3 people, Mom, Dad, and Callista. But I remembered that day. I was there. I had set the timer, propped the camera on a cooler, and run to join them. I reached for the frame and carefully popped it open. Behind the doctored image, the original photo remained, folded and hidden. There I was, right between them, grinning with my arm around Dad's shoulder. Mom's face paled when she saw what I'd found. We just thought it looked better balanced that way, she stammered. I gently refolded the picture and placed it in my bag. What they'd tried to bury, the truth had silently preserved, and as I walked out, the only sound was the tap of my heels on the hardwood floor. No voices, no protests, no more lies. The courthouse's stone steps were cool beneath my feet as I paused to collect myself before entering. The courtroom wasn't grand, no polished mahogany or golden seals like in movies. It was beige, bland, almost clinical. But to me, it felt sacred, a place where truth could finally outweigh manipulation. My parents sat in muted tones, projecting confusion and fragility. Callista wore a tailored gray blazer like she was chairing a board meeting, but her usual smirk had vanished. Beside me, Norelle arranged her documents with precise movements, her calm presence anchoring me in the storm. After formalities, the judge turned to Norelle. You may proceed with your opening summary. Norelle stood and without preamble, played an audio recording. My heart thudded as the sound came through the courtroom speakers. Slightly muffled but unmistakable. Callista's voice laughing, then Mom's chiming in. Dad's quieter but still present. Manipulated the dumb youngest one? She won't check. She just wants to be loved. The silence that followed was deafening. The judge leaned forward. This recording has been verified. Yes, Your Honor. Time-stamped, authenticated, and obtained legally by a third party who was present in the household. Callista shot to her feet. That's taken out of context. Sit down, Miss Stroud, the judge said sharply. This court does not tolerate grandstanding. I didn't look at my family. That recording wasn't just a revelation. It was confirmation of everything I had feared, suspected, silently carried. And now it had been heard. My parents didn't even turn toward me. That hurt more than anything they had said. I opened my folder and pulled out one final page. This, I said, rising to address the room, is the part they forgot. Norrell handed it to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. It's a clause written into the original family trust, I explained, signed by my grandfather before he passed. It grants me full veto power over any family asset transfer made before I turn 35. And when is your 35th birthday? The judge asked, flipping through the document. 2 days from now, Your Honor. The judge looked over his glasses. Then, as of the day after tomorrow, the contested assets cannot be transferred without your express consent. I could hear Callista's breath hitch. She turned toward our parents. You knew about this. Did either of you even read it? Her voice trembled with barely contained rage. Dad rubbed his forehead, saying nothing. Mom's face had gone paper white. From my coat pocket, I pulled something crumpled but sacred, a tiny origami crane, faded and worn at the wings. My grandfather had taught me how to fold it one quiet Sunday in his garage, then tucked it into his wallet. You're the one with wings, he'd told me. Remember that? It had been returned to me after his funeral, folded inside a cream envelope, along with a letter explaining why he'd added that special clause to his will. He'd watched his own siblings tear each other apart over inheritance and was determined history wouldn't repeat itself. I placed the crane on the table, a small paper guardian that had traveled through years of silence and betrayal to land exactly where it was meant to be, and bien. The judge finalized the interim ruling of freeze on all transferred estate assets, reopening of probate records, and formal investigation into misuse of family funds. Callista slumped in her chair. My mother opened her mouth, perhaps to plead, perhaps to manipulate, but the judge raised his hand. You've had your say. I turned to leave, my steps lighter than they had been in months. As I passed my family, my father finally looked up, his eyes clouded with something between regret and resignation. My mother whispered, Evie, please. I stopped for just a moment. This wasn't revenge, I said without turning. It was restoration. And with that, I walked forward, finally unburdened. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled into the driveway of my grandfather's lake house. No, my house now. The deed bore my name alone following the court's final ruling last week. But I wasn't arriving as a victor. I was here to breathe, to heal, to find myself again in the quiet spaces where my childhood had been happiest. The house looked much the same from the outside, save for a fresh coat of paint and trimmed hedges. Inside, everything felt both familiar and new. The scent of cedar still lingered, faint and warm like the memory of a hug. I placed my keys on the entry table and ran my hand along the old bookshelf where my grandfather used to line up his leather-bound ledgers and gardening magazines. Each room still held traces of him, a man who never raised his voice but left echoes deep enough to carry through decades. This space hadn't forgotten me, even when my family had. I wandered into the kitchen, brighter after renovations I'd commissioned. Standing at the sink where my grandfather used to hum while rinsing garden tomatoes, I let morning light wash over me and felt something shift. Not closure, just stillness. And in that stillness, peace. A knock at the door startled me. Mrs. Alden from 2 houses down stood on the porch, a weathered envelope in hand. "Found this in the mail slot at the old church mailbox," she said, adjusting her scarf. "It's for you. Looks old." My fingers recognized the handwriting immediately. My grandfather's. Back inside, I settled into the creaky armchair that had witnessed countless family gatherings and opened the envelope. The letter was dated 5 days before he passed Evie. If you're reading this, then the winds must have shifted. I feared they might. People forget what's fair when fear gets involved. I've always known your heart. It's why I chose you, because you'd protect, not possess. Speak softly, but stand when it matters. Sometimes justice takes time, but it always knows where to land. When your father was young, he watched his older sister charm her way into everyone's good graces while doing none of the work. History has a way of repeating unless someone is brave enough to change the pattern. The clause I added wasn't just about property, it was about truth. Use it wisely, with compassion but without apology. Love always, Papa. I folded the letter carefully, sealing the moment into my heart. Not relief exactly, more like release. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from Mom. I didn't play it immediately, just watched the screen pulse with notification light. Then curiosity won. Evie. Her voice was strained, softer than I remembered. "We didn't know how much you meant until you walked away. Maybe we didn't want to know. I don't expect you to forgive us. I just hope you're okay." There were no tears in my eyes, just a long, hollow breath. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't ready to open that door again either. Some things don't need slamming to be closed. I recorded a response I never sent. "I'm finding my way back to myself. Maybe someday we'll find our way back to each other." Later that afternoon, I walked upstairs to what used to be his study. I'd turned it into a reading room with white curtains and shelves of books he would have loved. On the mantel, I placed my folded crane, not just paper, but the part of me they'd tried to erase. The child who folded hope into corners, who stayed quiet because she thought love had to be earned. She lived here now, proud, whole, finally seen. As evening approached, I sat on the dock with my laptop, finishing an email to a support group I was forming for others caught in family estate battles. My legal victory had shown me how many people faced similar betrayals without the resources to fight back. Perhaps this was how healing happened, not by forgetting the wound, but by turning it into purpose. Down the shoreline, a group of children raced along the water's edge, laughing. One girl, maybe 10, chased a paper boat twirling in the breeze. I smiled, recognizing something of myself in her determination. I wasn't chasing approval anymore, not from people who had looked right through me for years. They'd given away the estate thinking I was dispensable. But I had always been the foundation, the quiet one, the steady one, the one who knew what was worth keeping and what needed to be let go. As the sun dipped below the tree line, painting the lake copper and gold, I closed my laptop and simply watched the light change. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my father, but I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Tomorrow, perhaps, or next month, time was finally mine to give or withhold. Sometimes you don't need to slam the door. Sometimes not returning is loud enough. Sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't mean shouting. It means walking away with your dignity intact and building something new in the space where hurt once lived. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was about reclaiming worth after years of being overlooked. Because family doesn't just mean shared blood, it means mutual respect. And respect, like trust, must be earned back once broken. Whether my family would ever earn it remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, I was no longer waiting for their validation to feel whole. I was the silent heir to something greater than property, the legacy of my own strength, finally recognized,